Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Beyond Bold. It is your host, Kyla Bolden, and thank you so much for joining me here today. If you are listening to this when it comes out, it is actually Tuesday, and Tuesdays are going to be our new upload day. So expect a new episode every single Tuesday. I'm really excited to make sure the episodes come out consistently for you guys. And this year, we have a lot of incredible guests that we're going to have on the podcast. And today's episode is actually with a founder, which I'm super, super excited about. Abby Schommer, who is the founder of CalPal. And she talks to us about how she started her company, ultimately what CalPal is all about. And I'll let her explain it. But basically, it is a platform that allows you to sync multiple different calendars together. And it's especially really good for individuals who have portfolio careers. And if you don't know what a portfolio career is, we're going to get all into it during this episode. And I really feel like if you're somebody who's always wanted to start a business, but didn't know when would be the good time, worried about the financial stability that you may or may not have when starting your own company, or wanted to know tools and tips how to balance multiple careers at a time while you're working a 9 to 5, this episode is perfect for you. So I'm super excited for you to hear all about Abby's founder journey and her new company, how she's balancing this portfolio career, and I just know you guys are going to love this episode. So let's get into it. So, Abby, thank you so much for joining me today. We kind of met in a funny way over TikTok. Which is interesting. I think I told you this. We recorded your podcast as well that will come out eventually, but I've never met somebody over TikTok. Are you meeting a lot of founders over that?
Yeah, I am. And this is why I'd be really remiss if TikTok does go away
Mm.
because I do feel like it's such a nice way to, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Second of all, I'm so glad that we connected. I was going to say IRL, but it's still virtually, but
Yeah.
one step closer, one step more synchronously than TikTok. But the thing that's really cool about meeting founders over TikTok is you kind of get a peek behind the curtain into their journey, their experience, their personality before you talk with them for the first time. And so it's funny, every single founder who I've connected with over like Zoom following a TikTok interaction, I feel very much almost like I know them. Like I know what to expect of their personality. I've gotten a window into their daily experience and the conversation just flows so much easier. Um like compare that to I used to have a background in like enterprise SaaS sales and I would get leads through LinkedIn. And then I would meet with people over a Zoom call who I had only known in a previous capacity on LinkedIn. And you know nothing of anyone's personality from LinkedIn. So you really never know what you're getting. So I do love that you kind of have this foyer into someone's like who someone shows up as a person by meeting them on TikTok before you meet with them in like a conference call.
What you said about LinkedIn, I literally feel like your LinkedIn tells you really nothing about a person. And I can't tell you how many companies that I thought were going terrific based on LinkedIn and then no longer exist, or founder stories that I thought were a certain way that's completely different just because LinkedIn really gives you I don't know, it's kind of like the Instagram of business, I would say. It's a really, like, curated perspective, and TikTok is really where you get to see, like, okay, this is actually how you build a business.
Yeah, completely. Somebody posted actually, fortunately, this was on LinkedIn, but this was very, very off brand for LinkedIn. A founder the other day posted on LinkedIn that, some of the folks in her network kept coming to her saying, it looks like you're killing it. And it's funny because I get a lot of those accolades too from people in my life who only are connected with me on LinkedIn and don't follow my TikTok. And it's funny because yes, on LinkedIn, like I publish the things that we're doing with my startup, with CalPal, also with a lot of like my freelancing work. I very much have a portfolio career. So they just see that I'm
Mhm.
doing all these things and they must figure that I'm operating from this place of abundance, right? Financial abundance, like very purpose-filled life. And while sometimes that's true, that's not the whole story, but you don't really go to LinkedIn to tell that full story.
Yeah.
I'm kind of trying to turn the tides on that a little bit, and what I have found is that and full transparency, I've taken to LinkedIn a little bit more because TikTok might be going away.
Mhm.
So I've been going to LinkedIn and I've been talking more openly about my life outside of just being a tech founder and the things that I am doing from a career standpoint in order to kind of sustain my journey as a founder financially and how I've embraced this portfolio career. And previously, that's something I would have never done on LinkedIn. I'm like, no, no, no. On LinkedIn, I show up as a founder first. And as far as everyone's concerned, I want them to think my company's killing it. But what I found is that the more authentic I've been on LinkedIn, actually, the engagement on LinkedIn is so much better than
Yeah.
more of my curated, like very polished and refined posts on just like product related updates on CalPal, for example. So I do think the tides are turning a little bit, especially if TikTok goes away. People are gonna look to other platforms to show up more authentically, but there's something that can't really be emulated about the fact you can go on TikTok, just pick up a phone, and just talk to a camera. I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable doing that on LinkedIn. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but yeah, kind of showing up a bit more authentically has been getting me more engagement both on and off TikTok.
Absolutely, and I feel like YouTube might become a little bit more popular just because, I'm thinking about my LinkedIn too, and we always have to think about founders. What are we using each social media platform for? And then who is your audience? So, for in my instance, like my company is an ed tech company, and so my audience is like superintendents, government officials, etc. And so I more point towards that when I'm using LinkedIn, which, not unfortunately, but, like, you have to be more professional, I guess, like, more career focused if that is your the people who are buying your product, but what I end up using TikTok for is for connecting with other founders, connecting with other people in the tech industry, which I think maybe they're not giving me, like, a dollar in my pocket, but they're helping me with connections that help grow my network, and then hopefully eventually my net worth as well too, right?
Yeah, I feel like I'm kinda spoiled because and I was explaining this to my parents the other day because my parents always look at me and they say, "What even is your job at this point?" And I'm like, "Well, the reality is I have basically 9 jobs." And again, previously, I wasn't as forthcoming about that on LinkedIn. I wanted to show up as a founder first. But speaking to audience, so the audience for my tech startup is people with portfolio careers.
Mm.
So, not to sell CalPal because that's absolutely not what I'm here to do
No, but
today,
I wanna talk
but
about it.
we are okay.
Yeah. So CalPal.
But we are no, no, no. So we are a tool that helps you get more of what matters done across facets of life and work. And we're really outfitted for people with portfolio careers, right? And these are people who have multiple Google workspaces that they're a part of, and they have obligations to different stakeholders across those different Google workspaces. And they want to make sure that they are keeping promises to themselves and to their clients about how they're spending their time. And it's really difficult to do that when you only have one calendar, right? And you can't synchronize and you have one Calendly associated with that one calendar because then that one Calendly might not accurately reflect your true availability based on things that you need to attend to on your other calendars, right? So CalPal at its core is something that basically synchronizes all of your calendars and your task apps across work and life. So you can really make sure you are allocating time in the ways that you want to, right? Like you are kind of taking back control over your career and your life. And so here's the thing, by me talking about me personally having a portfolio career on LinkedIn, I am appealing to my ICP for
Mhm.
CalPal.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the funny thing. Whereas before I figured, oh, talking about me having all these side gigs might make people feel less inclined to use my startup. The opposite has been true. Me talking openly about how I am managing this portfolio career and portfolio life has helped me reach audiences who could really benefit from using the tool that I'm building.
Mhm. Wow, and I love what you said about portfolio careers, and I think a lot more people are moving towards that, and I actually think a lot more people have that than we think. I was watching a TikTok like a couple weeks ago, and this girl, just came from a conference in San Francisco, and she was saying that you would be surprised how many startup founders also have other jobs, other things that they do for money, and how most of the time until their startup reaches either like revenue generating or their startup has raised a ton of money, like a crazy amount of money, then that's when their startup exceeds the other stuff that they're making. But she's like, I know startup founders of like AI companies that also have like laundromats as businesses, like these, like kind of like not traditional, but like these kind of like basic but like proven generating careers, or they do like consulting. Tons of them do consulting as well too. And I even think from the standpoint of a lot of the founders that I know, a lot of them often have other streams of income, or some of them want to but have been scared to have other streams of income. I know there's been a lot of push, especially from the VCs, in which I think founders get a lot of advice from VCs, and I think some of the advice could be good, but if your VC hasn't actually run a company, then it might be really hard for them to give you the best advice when it comes to, you know, I can't afford, my rent, or I can't afford a lifestyle that I'm happy with, and then I'm supposed to build a really big company. That is not possible for a lot of people. And then the people that you see that don't have any side careers or whatever, oftentimes they have like wealth behind them, or they have like cushions in which they could be like, okay, I know I'll be okay, even if I'm living in like this shoebox apartment. I know that like if I get tired of it in 2 months, I could go live somewhere else and be comfortable. Even that is such a form of privilege that a lot of people, especially underestimated founders, don't have.
Yeah, this is one of my biggest platforms. Actually, this is a big premise of my podcast, Marginal.
Mhm.
It's stories from the socially marginalized founders you've likely not heard from yet. And the reason that we created that podcast is because startup culture is so characterized by privilege.
Mhm.
And I think it's really counterintuitive because when I first got into the startup ecosystem, I thought it was all about like literally pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, like bootstrapping and being scrappy. And the reality is, a lot of people who are able to finance their businesses, keep their businesses going long enough to get enough traction, to secure product market fit, to secure investment, to get to scaling, those people have other means of sustaining themselves until they can get to that point, because that takes a while. That can take years. And like you said, a lot of folks, they have generational wealth to fall back on. And I'm not gonna lie, there was a lot of privilege inherent in my early startup journey, which I'll get to in a second. But like founders don't talk about that when they're telling their startup stories. Like when they go on podcasts like Masters of Scale or How I Built This, they're not really talking about all the help they got along the way. And so it fuels this meritocracy myth we have, particularly in America, which is like working hard will help us secure the dollar. But it's like, no, no, no. You have to have a lot of cards proverbially stacked in your favor. There was this Medium article that someone published a while ago, and he was like, the secret to my startup success is my white male privilege. And I loved this article on Medium. I've been trying to find this guy. He posted this like 10 years ago, and I've been trying to track him down because he basically just really illuminated all that goes into being able to make a startup a viable thing. I mean, even something as simple as the notion of a friends and family round.
Mhm.
And for those who might not know what a friends and family round is, it's basically when you are a startup founder, if you have people in your personal network who have enough money to qualify as accredited investors, you can have them invest in your business. But the barrier to entry there is so high. Like those folks' net worth need to be at a certain level. So it assumes that you have people in your life who are millionaires plus.
Yeah.
And me and my co-founder joke, my co-founder comes from a marginalized background, and he's like, uh, "My friends and family are asking me for money. I can't
Yeah.
ask them for money." So, I love kind of this demystifying of all that goes into being a startup founder and these alternative types of entrepreneurship, and this is absolutely what I'm trying to embrace more openly, which is you can have a startup and have other streams of revenue and income to help you be able to run this business, make long-term plays in this business, and make decisions in your business that aren't coming from a place of scarcity.
Mhm.
Because when you are making decisions from a place of lack, fear, your business decisions are never going to be as good. You're not making decisions that are in the best interest of your customer. You're making decisions that are in the best interest of you as a founder. And that's like one of the quickest ways to kill a startup. So, yes, there are so many founders that do other things in order to keep them in the game, right? Because that's really all you want to do. You want to stay in the game long enough to pivot and iterate and test all these new things until you've really secured product market fit, and then you can start to, go from there. Another thing I'll say very quickly is much like you were surprised about all of the side gigs that founders had, when we launched our wait list for CalPal, we got so many signups from not just founders. We figured we'd have people like me and my co-founder Brian signing up. We got so many signups from people in corporate jobs
Mm.
because people in corporate jobs are doing side gigs right now. They're doing freelance work in addition to their corporate jobs. And a big reason for this is the layoff climate is very exacerbated. Job security is just not a thing right now. Corporate jobs used to be the safe, secure thing. They're
Yeah.
not, particularly if you work in tech. And people just want to kind of diversify their efforts and have all these different means of making income so they don't just have one corporate entity dictating their livelihood.
Mhm.
So everybody's kind of embracing this new era of work, whether you're a founder or you're someone in corporate who just wants to kind of pursue things outside of your one corporate job.
Yeah, and I would say, like, just because of how the economy has changed so much and also, like, AI coming into the picture, a lot of people, unfortunately, will lose their jobs, just because of how, a lot of tech companies overhired, to be honest, and they did not need all the people that they have, and there's a lot more efficient ways to do things. But, I was talking to a friend about this, how universal income actually might have to become a thing because I don't think people are going to be able to rely on those traditional 9 to 5 jobs. Because for me, somebody that I would have hired a full-time job for, maybe now I need them 2 days a week based on all the different AI tools that they could use in order to get their work done. And then I, as a small business owner, is thinking, okay, why would I hire somebody full time to do this job that literally is only a 2 day a job week? I mean, 2 day a job 2 day a week job rather. And it's just like on the other side, it's like, there's layoffs happening. And I also think people are thinking a lot more about the life that they want and how they want to spend their time and what they want to do. I mean, I think, and this is something we talk a lot about on Beyond Bold, building a career that is intentional is super important because you're doing this thing 9 to 5. And I don't want that to be confused with you have to love every single thing you do because, like, I love my job, I love my business, but a lot of the stuff, if I did not have to do it, I would not do it. Like, there's a lot of little things that you just have to do. And I think that's called being an adult. But really, you should be moving towards a life that you like the ins and outs of your day. Most days you wake up and you like what you're doing. And I think because we're consciously thinking about that, a lot of people are like, okay, the 9 to 5 job isn't necessarily for me. Like, I wanna be doing other things. So whether it's you have a 9 to 5 and then, you're more fulfilled having another I don't even wanna call it side gig, but, like, another thing that you're passionate
Yeah.
about actually makes you more productive in other roles. And I think even from a productivity standpoint, it would be great for people to feel comfortable while working multiple careers, even if it's in a corporate environment, but you're doing half the week here and half the week there and doing something that's entrepreneurial focused. I think people will be a lot more happier.
I love that you what I was gonna say is I love that your advice wasn't to tell listeners who have corporate jobs to quit their corporate jobs.
Oh, no.
This is something that I've been really outspoken about because particularly within the founder community, there's this notion of going all in on your business. And I just
Mhm,
did a post about this the other day because I had another guest on the podcast who articulated this so well. Um, that is such a damaging thing to tell people because if you just quit your corporate job, you quit your stream of income to go all in on your business, where you're going to ultimately get to that place where you're going to be operating from a place of scarcity. And
mhm,
I think we we take, we it's hard. Sometimes we don't even realize we take for granted that like our nervous system might be really highly activated. Like you might feel like you love what you're doing in your startup and you're building and you feel so like you're leading this purpose-driven life, but like your hair might start falling out.
mhm,
You might not be sleeping. You might be grinding your teeth because you physiologically, like your body feels very unsafe because you are dwindling your savings, right? And so I just think, and going back to privilege as well, not everybody has the privilege of cutting a corporate job and then having a safety net. So I do love this world where it's like, no, 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 you can keep your corporate job, but there's ways that you can maybe try to take back some agency over your career and do other things, even within your corporate job, right? Like I think there's certain companies that will allow you to be very like entrepreneurial, which is I know is like kind of a big buzzword now. But like if you are like, okay, I have a very limited capacity and amount of hours in a day that I can do something. Maybe you don't start a side business in addition to your corporate job, but within your corporate job, you set up a work stream. You say you work in marketing for a company and you love doing podcasts and you tell marketing, hey, like I think we could like very viably launch a podcast and it would be a great brand marketing play for the organization. Kind of spinning up your own ideas and your own initiatives within an organization, I think is also a great way to feel like you're taking back agency over your career. And so just like I feel like the word of 2025 is like getting creative. I've talked
Mhm.
to a lot of other founders who are like, we can get creative about the way that we work and the way that we have our needs met while also feel like we're allocating time in ways that really fills our cup, like from a purpose standpoint. So that's kind of that's what I would encourage folks to do. Like, it's just not viable for everybody to quit their corporate career to go all in on their startup. And what I also say too is that, because I think a refrain from investors, like you said, or even other external stakeholders is, oh, I'm not going to invest in this founder because it looks like they're not committed to their startup. Like, why am I going to invest in them if they're not investing all of themselves in their startup? And I think that's a very ableist, like privileged outlook on just the whole system. And as far as I'm concerned, if I see a founder who is building their startup and doing a side business and freelancing and doing Rover, or maybe only doing one of those additional things, if they are architecting their life in a way that allows them to keep building their startup, as far as I'm concerned, that founder is all in on their business and they have longevity. So I would place my bets on that founder.
You're so right. And I saw a clip from Dragon's Den, which is like Canada's Shark Tank. It's basically the same thing.
Yeah,
And one of the dragons was telling a guy who he's a middle-aged guy. He has three kids and he still has a job and he's been doing his business on the side, or not even on the side, but like doing also his entrepreneurial endeavor. And the business has been generating money, and he was like, "You should quit your job." And he was like, "Well, I have three kids and we're able to get to this point, but I really think with the investment, then I'll be able to make a sustainable income in order to support my kids." And the guy was like, "Well, I did it. I did it and I had three kids." And I was like, "You did it in like 1980. That was different. That was a
yeah,
time where people one person could be at home and the other person could go work a really regular job and still send their kids to college. That is not, and own a home
exactly.
and have a mortgage. That's just not the world we live in. Like, you need two parents most of the time going to work at a over average paying job in order to just put food on the table. That's the world we're
I
living
know.
in. It was different back then. So I also think like I always talk to founders about getting advice because I think people love to give founders advice. And there has been a lot of like a big business around making founders the product actually when it comes to like accelerators and all of these things. And I've been part of many accelerators, so I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm more saying that like there is a lot of advice that founders get out there. And if that person it is not somebody who you could relate to in a multitude of ways, maybe you shouldn't take advice from them because their world is just different than yours. If they built a company in 1970s, that is different than building a company in 2024, right? And you might be able to learn some things from them, but like in generally, like it's different. Opportunities were different back then than they are today.
Yeah, and every person is different. And here's the thing, I don't owe anybody an explanation as to why I lead a portfolio career and why
Mhm.
I'm not all in on my startup. I do. I explain it because I want others to feel less alone. But that's the thing is like nobody needs to know like why you are creating the semblance of career that you are. But sometimes I do feel like we need to give excuses, right? Like, so in my instance, um, I have a chronic disease. I have type 1 diabetes. And I am so fortunate that my husband has a full time, like W 2 job. And so I'm on his health insurance. But when you don't have your own health insurance, like when I worked at Facebook for a number of years and I didn't pay a dime for like any of my medications. Like my insulin cost me pennies, which will never happen again for the rest of my life. And in earnest, I mean, I stayed at Facebook for a number of years. Even when I was at Facebook, I did get to the point where I didn't feel very fulfilled with the work I was doing, but I stayed for longer than maybe what others would have felt made sense because the health benefits were just completely unmatched. And for someone with chronic disease, I mean, it's like I had hit the jackpot. But you're completely right. Like that's a big reason why I operate the way I do. But if I had to like if I had to explain that to an investor, that's so violating, right?
It
Like it
is.
kind of assumes that the investor doesn't trust the founders, that they are kind of doing the things that are best for their business. And if you have an investor that doesn't trust you, that's probably not someone who you want to take money from because they're not going to trust you throughout the process. And you're basically entering into a marriage with that person. But yeah, I mean, times are different, people are different, and you have no idea like what someone's going through, um, their financial situation. And so I'm really of the opinion that, everybody needs to do what makes the most sense for them.
And so let's actually talk about how to build a portfolio career and maybe from the standpoint of how you went about it for you, because you've developed a career
Yeah.
that, you're working on your startup and you're also doing other things. So tell me a bit about that journey. And then I think that kind of parlays into your founder journey as well, too.
Sure, sure. Yeah. I'll start founder journey and then I'll talk portfolio career because I did start as a founder before I started building a portfolio career. And I think the story is like very telling of just like, yeah, the state of startups we're in right now. But when we first launched the startup we have now, it was actually a completely different product. And we launched that in like late summer to fall of 2023. And the plan was with me and my co-founder, and that product was a financial analytics and accounting platform for what came to be like direct to consumer businesses, like e-commerce businesses. And the plan with that startup was we were going to raise angel investment right away. But 2023, 2024, the fundraising environment was just, the climate was very different than what me and my co-founder had experienced in previous companies. And also our investor network that we had had previously became completely obsolete for the product we were building. We both had heavy backgrounds in like mobile development and like mobile applications and gaming. And now we were working on a product for direct to consumer, like largely web-based businesses. So even the previous connections we had didn't really apply to the business we were building right now. So a number of months went on. And at this time, I was actually living with my parents. So going even a step further back, I lived in the Bay Area for 7 years. I'm originally from the East Coast, but I moved to the Bay Area for 7 years and I kind of launched a lot of my tech career out there. And then I moved home in 2023. And the plan was always to stay with my parents in their house for a little bit until we found our next spot. For a while, we thought we might buy a house. We were just going to keep our stuff in storage and live with our parents just for like a month or two until we found our next spot. What ended up happening was we ended up staying with my mom for 7 months because my husband did have a job, but he works in education and Boston's a very expensive place to live. It's like, I thought San Francisco was expensive. It's still more expensive, but Boston's catching up, right? So we were at the point where we were like, okay, if we're solo income, we're not really in a place to move out of my parents just yet. And me and my co-founder were working on trying to raise money for our startup. And we realized it was going to be a much longer journey than we thought. So what I agreed on with my husband was, you know, love my parents to death. I loved living with them. But my husband was like, I would like us to have our own place now, please. Like, we just lived 3,000 miles away. We had complete independence for 7 years. Now we're back living with our parents. I'd like some of our independence back. And I was like, okay, fair. So the deal that I made with myself and my husband was that I wanted to find kind of a side gig that would help me make enough money to cover rent should we move into an apartment complex. And then that way, my husband's income we could use for all of our other kind of expenses, like our day-to-day, like food,
Yeah.
experience, travel. We love to travel. And I was like, in so much as I can find some semblance of work, maybe it's a few different gigs that amounts to the amount that we'd want to pay in rent, we feel comfortable like launching from my parents' house while still building my startup. So that's what we did. And where I started, honestly, and I know that this is a little counter to some of what you might hear from other like fractional executives. I actually started on Upwork. And I know that Upwork is very saturated and a lot of the jobs there aren't particularly high paying and it can be kind of a rat race. A lot of times you have to bid for different jobs and it can feel like a little bit of a grind. But because I had never done any freelancing before, I didn't have a portfolio. So I couldn't really go to a lot of clients directly with like this robust portfolio other than just showing them my resume and showing them that I had worked at Facebook. But the problem is when you work at a place like Facebook, when you leave, you can't retain any of the work you did. So
Mm.
all of the work I did at Facebook is owned by Facebook. So I couldn't really point to anything I did there. So I needed to kind of rebuild a portfolio that I had total control over. And so what I did was I went to Upwork and I actually got connected with somebody who was a working with direct to consumer businesses, e-commerce businesses. And when I was at Facebook, I worked in the enterprise e-commerce vertical. And he basically had an agency and he wanted somebody to help with marketing execution. So he would bring in clients and I would run marketing for the clients. And that's not the best for everybody because basically that means that like we split 50-50. And so a lot of the money that like the retainer that goes to those clients, a lot of it is going to the salesperson that I work with. However, for me, it worked at the time because I didn't have the time to do sales. Like business development it takes a really long time, but marketing execution for me, it doesn't take me a lot of time because I've been doing it for so long, right? And I had worked at Facebook. So this worked for us because he did all the selling, I did all the marketing execution, we did revenue share, and yeah, I built up a portfolio of a big number of like small e-commerce businesses that I loved working with because I had worked with enterprise e-commerce at Facebook, working with these small businesses. It felt really cool to kind of democratize some of what I had learned at some of these biggest companies in the world and bring that to bear on small business owners. I felt like I was really making a difference too, so I loved it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I got my start. So I wouldn't be afraid of freelancing platforms like Upwork. Pangea is another really good one. They just launched. I've been really happy with Pangea. It's kind of like a new and emerging freelancer platform. And right now, Pangea doesn't take any of your earnings. So Upwork does. So just something to note, like Upwork as a platform will take some of the earnings that you make, and that's kind of their fee. Pangea is not doing that right now. So as a freelancer, it's highly attractive. But using some of those freelance platforms to get your start is great. So that's how I got my start. And then from there, I just started to kind of get like referral business because I had built a portfolio. I started talking to people in my life about how I was doing this. And that's another piece of advice I'd give too. Like, let people know. Because at first I hid it because again, I was a
Yeah.
little bit embarrassed that I was a founder doing freelance marketing on the side. But once I started talking about how I was doing it, people would come to me and say, "Oh, my friend has an e-commerce store and they just worked with an agency and they had a terrible experience. Would you be able to help them out?" And so just getting that word of mouth out there, getting referral business, which was great because I work with those clients directly. So I'm able to take all of the cut. Then it kind of just went from there. And another thing I'll say too is I have a podcast that I do as an extension of my startup called Marginal, like I mentioned. And I do that for free, right? Like Marginal right now, like we don't take any sponsorships. It's a great like lead gen mechanism for my startup, but for right now, it technically is unpaid. But I started posting about Marginal on LinkedIn and using it as our content marketing strategy. And I got reached out to by somebody that I worked with like almost 10 years ago. And he asked me if I would want to help head up content marketing for his games consulting group. So I've now just taken on them as a fractional client and I'm going to be producing a podcast for them and I'm going to be paid for it.
Oh,
So I think the biggest thing I would say is sometimes it's a little bit humbling, especially if you've gone from having this big career to now doing things for free or doing things for very little money to start. But all you need to do is start and kind of build that proof of concept of and show people what you can do and talk about what you're doing. And then from there, it becomes a little bit more of inbound versus outbound.
yeah.
And in the opportunities will start to come to you with time. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I think so many people are afraid to, especially founders, go off and have another source of income. Like you said, we feel like investors won't like it, but I honestly think the mental health of you as a founder is most important over everything. Meaning, if you cannot think properly, you're not going to be able to make decisions right for your business, and it's going to take you longer to do things. And a big part of mental health is being able to afford a lifestyle that you are comfortable with, right? And part of that is making enough money. And so having these, or side gigs or other streams of income is a lot better for you because then you're able to actually devote like mental space to your job, to your startup, rather than having to worry about like all the things that you have to pay and you're not going to be able to pay, right? Because that is a lot and it makes it so hard as a founder, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, when your basic needs aren't being met, I mean, here's the thing, like, if I'm gonna be thoroughly transparent, like, my basic needs are very much being met right
Mhm.
now. Like, 2024, it was the least amount of money I've ever made in my career, save for, like, maybe my 1st or 2nd job out of college. Um, but, like, we did completely fine. Like, we still saved in the last year. We're in such a fortunate position. Again, like, my husband's job equips us with so much. Um, but going into 2025, I decided I wanna make more money this year. I wanna continue building my startup, but I wanna make more money because I feel like if I do make more money, I'll be able to be more present in my startup because there's
Mhm.
gonna be other things that are entering into my life in 2025, like other expenses that are gonna start to pile on, and I wanna plan for that, and I wanna plan for a reality where I can reasonably cover those costs and show up to meetings with my beta customers and my co-founder and be present and not be in that meeting while also doing math in my head about whether or not we're gonna be able to cover all of our expenses that month, because that is where you will focus your time and attention. Like, fear trumps everything. Anxiety trumps everything. And so to be able to quell that and to calm your nervous system through other means of, making money and feeling safe. Everybody deserves to feel safe and secure. And
Mhm.
once you feel safe and secure, you can work with a clear head, with a quiet mind, and you can do that deep focused work that will be better for your business in the onset. So that's where I am in 2025. Like, I have other jobs and I want more of them. And
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that is shameful or bad to say about that because I know that the more money I can make, the more I can make CalPal a killer startup backed by people who are so present in the company and are doing everything they can for their customers, not just for the financial well-being of the founders in the short term.
Absolutely, and I think saying you wanna make more money is something that I think more women need to say. I often feel, and I talk about this all the time, even as, like, an impact-focused founder myself, I think a lot of females, of entrepreneurs, founders, often find themselves needing to be like, "Oh, it's not about the money, it's about the impact," right? And when it comes down to it, I can't make an impact if I don't have money. It's really hard to run a business, and then it's hard to run a business without having your more than your basic needs met, honestly. And I think when it comes to women also, the more economic power we do have, the better the world is in general. So really focusing on, okay, make more money. And then you're actually able to grow your company even more, do more, be better, help more people, help your family, help yourself. But if you aren't making enough
Yeah.
money, it's going to be really, really hard for you to do anything that has any type of impact or good, to be honest.
Yeah. I love the point you made too about making enough money to even have more than your basic needs met, because
Yeah.
I think that that is so important. Like, we deserve to not just cover the cost of food and housing, but we deserve to spend time with friends and family and maybe go out to eat at that like, we all have I'm very big on, like, value-based spending, and so I am somebody who there's certain things that, like, I will spend money on, and then there's certain things that I won't. And I think every founder kinda has to get really clear on this, especially when you are making less money because you're gonna maybe have to choose for the first time in your life in a while, like, where your limited resources are going. And, your values-based spending might exceed just basic needs, right? Like, so for me, what's really important is, me and my husband, we don't go out to eat very often, but when we do, we want to make it worth our while, right?
Mhm.
So we love going out to eat. We love travel. We love going to the movies. We love going to the movies in a movie theater. And like, that's actually like
Expensive
excessively a
things,
lot of
actually.
money, like, especially if you go to a nighttime showing, yeah. But for us, it's really important because it allows us to be present. We love movies. We love talking about movies after. And so I wanna make sure that, like, going to the movies is not a basic need, but
Mm,
it makes me like a more like it puts me in a better mental health space, honestly, because if what I'm doing and I have had months like this in my business where I'm like, "Cut, cut, cut." Like, "Don't get your nails done, don't go to the movies, don't go out to eat for a month." And then you just start to feel almost a little bit resentful, right?
mhm,
Because what will happen is there's gonna be other people in your life that you're seeing are doing things that bring them joy. And then your life is gonna be confined to grinding on your startup, grinding on your side gigs, and then, like, excessively saving. And I think you need to allow yourself some of those facets of life that are, yes, maybe more than just your basic needs, but make you feel like a well-rounded person who's taking care of themselves and allowing themselves moments of joy and play and fulfillment and socialization. That's just as important because I don't know, otherwise you're gonna be walking around like bitter, resentful, angry, and I don't wanna be making decisions from that place in my business either.
I completely agree with what you said, and I also found it's all about intentionality, like building your career in an intentional way, spending your money in an intentional way, and really thinking about, okay, what am I spending time on? And then what do I want to be spending time on, and what's the best for my future? Before we go, I want you to give one piece of advice, and it might be like an unpopular opinion that you think founders should follow.
Yeah, I mean, I said it before, but I think the big thing is, like, the controversial opinion I have is you do not need to go all in on your startup.
Yeah.
I think particularly for underestimated, socially marginalized founders, like, that's just quite frankly not a possibility.
Mhm.
And the more that we tout that that is the one way of building your startup, like, we're gonna get so many founders who kind of exclude themselves from the conversation because they're gonna say, "Okay, well, that's not a financial viability for me, so I'm not gonna build anything." And
Yeah.
I'm like, I get sick thinking about a world where every single company and every single, like, founder team is just the same, right?
Mhm.
It's folks who come from the same background, who have the same, you know, skill set, who have the same cultural and racial identity. Like, I really, I don't want to see a world where, especially all of our technology is built and bred by these same players over and over. So you don't have to go in all in on your startup. You can keep your corporate job while working on your business on the side on the weekends. I know there's countless people who bootstrap their companies that way. I mean, that's a great way to bootstrap. You don't need to raise capital if you can just take your corporate income and use that to finance yourself until you get traction and product market fit with your
Yeah.
product. Um, that would be my biggest thing. I think the other thing that I'll add to that, just to provide a little bit more of a nuanced take on what I said earlier, is your startup doesn't need to be a unicorn.
Mhm.
You don't need to build the next billion-dollar company. I think there's so much out there around, like, the Silicon Valley playbook, huge venture capital raises, and the more founders I've talked to, especially folks who, like, have raised venture capital like yourself and folks who haven't been able to, and the more I've learned about the venture capital model, is securing venture capital a lot of time means a growth at all costs model. That, like, one company in that venture fund's portfolio is gonna provide them that multiple X return at the expense of the other companies busting. And also, when you take on venture capital, like, you have to think about what else you're saying yes to when you take on that money.
Mhm.
Like, who are the stakeholders that you're now accountable to? And are you okay with, like, answering to them in certain ways? And so I would like to provide a foil to that and say, if you never wanna raise money for your startup at all, you can completely bootstrap. If you want to raise money in a way that helps you retain a little bit more agency over the company, maybe you only wanna go the angel investment route, you could do that. You could just try to customer fund your business. You could do that. There's, like, so many different ways that startups can look, and, I think that's the biggest message. Like, I guess if we need to sum it all up, you can get creative. There is no singular playbook on how to start and scale and, like, exit a business. There's so many different ways entrepreneurship can look, and you have the ability to get creative on the ways that you're gonna architect your life to to support the type of company you want to be building and how you want to be spending your time while building that company.
That was so well said. Thank you so much, Abby, for joining us. So, where can people find you to learn more about your company and yourself?
Sure. Well, folks can find me on LinkedIn at Abby Schommer. On LinkedIn, you'll see me posting across a variety of different facets of work and life. You'll see the product of all my jobs. You'll also learn a bit more about CalPal there. If you're interested, if you're someone who has a portfolio career and you want to make sure who you're holding yourself accountable to spending time on the things that matter most, synchronizing your calendars across work and life, you can go to getcalpal.com and you can sign up for our wait list. If in the how did you hear about us field, you just include the Beyond Bold podcast, I will bump you up to the top of the wait list so you get instant free access to CalPal, because we would love to support listeners of the show. Yeah. We can include that in the episode show notes. And yeah, I think LinkedIn and getcalpal.com are some of the best ways to stay keyed into what I'm doing.
Perfect, perfect. I wish you the best of luck with CowPow. Well, we're so excited to give it a try. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. Okay, guys, I am sure you enjoyed that episode. I know I did. Abby is just such an inspiration, and I feel like what she's building is going to be so helpful for so many people. We are truly moving into a time where I think it is critical for more and more people to be entrepreneurs, even if you do work a 9 to 5. I think gone are the days where working multiple jobs are looked down upon. Honestly, it should have never been looked down upon, but I think it's something that a lot of people or should start doing for multiple reasons. Make more money, live a happier life, live a more interesting life. Yeah, I'm really excited and I love what Abby's doing. So, guys, hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure to follow us on Instagram at Beyond Bold Pod. Make sure to follow us on YouTube as well too. Subscribe. If you're watching this, download it, send it to 5 friends, write into our DMs on Instagram and tell us more about what you want to learn from this podcast. And always thank you so, so much for listening. And I hope you have a fantastic week.